right, everybody, welcome to the January 2025 meeting of the Athens Forge Group. We are a member of the Alabama Forge Council. Our demonstrator today is Al Stevens. Al has been a blacksmith almost as long as Methuselah. He's been around a long time. He started out working in a colonial reproduction shop, if I'm not mistaken, a little further north. Did you not? Yeah. How about that?
All right. I got this. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Once again, we got a lot of new guys. We got, a bunch of new guys here. I got started blacksmithing when, as a family, we took a camping trip up to center of Illinois to a state historic site called Lincoln's New Salem. And it was an 1835 era village set up. And I walked in this building one day, and here was a guy blacksmithing. Up to that point, I had been a machinist and an industrial maintenance mechanic for many years. My director's giving me things to... And I thought all blacksmiths shoot horses. All I'd seen was what was on television. I was really impressed, and I got involved with that historic site as a volunteer. But I told them, all I'm interested in is working in the blacksmith shop. And that's whenever I could get. I was living in St. Louis at the time. So whenever I had a day that I could run up there, I would run up there and I would work with the resident smith. Eventually I got to the point where both he and the park were comfortable with me being in the shop by myself. So I'd go up there and work, and the park moved him off to another site for about a year. From there, during that time, I become involved with the local blacksmith organization, just like we've got here. At that point, it was the Blacksmiths Association of Missouri. And from there, I met a lot of very talented people. In those days, that's where you found your tools at, was, no matter what you needed, that's where you found it. Being able to go online or go anywhere and purchase tools, there just wasn't very many sites available at all. So because of that group, like this one, I learned to make some of my own tools, and I was influenced by some individuals in that group that were very talented blacksmiths, very talented metalsmiths, I'll say. Some of you may have heard of a publication called the Blacksmith Journal, put out by Jerry Hoffman of Londell, Missouri. Jerry was a part of BAM. Another fella, Doug Hendrickson, who I met, who actually I saw a newspaper article about him, and on another camping trip, just the wife and I figured we wasn't too far from his shop, so I just hunted it down and just walked in the door one day and introduced myself and sat there and talked with Doug a while, and it wasn't long that he had me in the fire. That relationship grew to the point that Doug would send me pieces to do some pre-forging on for him. And one of those pieces was the cheese cutter that I'll be talking about today. Doug used to send me, big, whatever it was, 3/4 or a gallon tomato cans full of 10-inch pieces of 5/16 round, and I would forge out a taper on either end of them and send them back to him. And that's where I got really my start. In 1992, I decided I wanted to make my living as a blacksmith. And I wound up at that point then going to Pennsylvania, where I was the head blacksmith at a company that made colonial reproduction ironwork. And I was there for until 2004, I guess. In the year 2000, my good friend Doug Hendrickson at this point decided that he wanted to stop doing his production line and concentrate on his art more. That's where Doug started. Doug was had a master's degree in art, and he taught at Duke University for many years before he had retired. Doug offered me his production line. One of the things in Doug's production line was a cheese cutter, okay? And so then for the next 18 years, I made cheese cutters for myself and sold them to the point of not quite 12,000 cheese cutters that I made. I discovered the other day that I still knew how to make a cheese cutter, even though it's been a few years since I've made one. So today we're going to do just a real simple, what I call a bowed cheese cutter. We'll do that one. And then the next one that I'm going to do is, several years ago, several of us went down to visit Clay at his shop, and he was giving us a tour of all his stuff. And as I walked by this glass-fronted cabinet, and I looked down, and there was a cheese cutter laying there. And just from the shape of it, I knew whose it was. And I took some pictures of it. I asked Clay if he's able to come out today to bring that cheese cutter with him. That's the second cheese cutter we're going to make today. So, as I do the demonstration, I'm going to talk about some various ways to do things, because we all don't have the same equipment. We all don't have a coal forge and an induction forge and a gas forge and 3 power hammers. A lot of us just have a forge made out of a box of dirt, with a hair dryer blowing to it, and our anvil. And that's fine. You can do a lot of work with that. So we'll talk about some different ways to do things today. If you have a question, please holler it out. If I don't know the answer to it, I'm sure we've got someone here that does. And if not, we'll make something up. So, to start out, if you're taking notes, I'm going to start out with you can leave that piece out for a while, that 1/4-inch piece. I'm going to start out with a piece of 10 inches long, 5/16 round material, and I'm going to start forging my taper out on the end of it. I'm not going to take it quite down to a point, and after I get that point established, then I'll start moving back a little bit. We're going to do 2 at once here? Okay. No, I need to get the length. I'm going to draw this 10-inch piece of 5/16 out to 11.5 inches. Yes, I'm leaving the taper square right now. Because actually, the square makes up a part of this design. Doug was always into what he, here, let me just grab him, as what he referred to as lines. I always looked at metal as being somewhat linear and not able to move it around. Doug was into shapes. Doug was into how the light reflects off a piece. What's it going to look like if you do this to it? Several of you have heard me tell the story, you know, that give me just a second, that I'll get done with something and I'll think, man, that looks pretty neat. Now I'll kind of stand back and look at it, you know, kind of, if I can get my arm around, I'd pat myself on the back. And then even though Doug's been passed for several years now, I can almost hear him in this ear saying, yeah, that's all right, but what if? You know, and what if's a nice place to go sometimes, because it, you know, sometimes it'll get you in trouble, you know, but other times you learn some things, you know, you look at things in a little bit different perspective, and that's a good thing. Here, let me just grab them. You tell me which one's hot. So you can see how I've only forged that taper about 4 inches long. I'm not quite to my 11 and a half yet. Work your material hot. I also have been teaching some classes at Bird on the Mountain. And I always tell my students that, you know, you need to stop hammering on a piece when you're not moving it any longer. When it gets down to this dull gray color here, you need to stop hitting it. Now that's a good temperature to planish things at, but you're not going to move the metal anymore. Now if you use an 8-pound hammer like Dustin does, you can still kind of move it around some.
He's jealous.
All right, so we're going to call that one 11 and a half. Now I'm going to take about that last inch and I'm going to turn it and I'm going to octagon that last inch. You know, we all are when we take a piece of metal and when we draw it out to shape, for instance, if we start with round and we want to end up with round, we draw it down to a 4-sided taper, and then you hammer on those corners, and you turn it from square into an octagon. And then if you want to round it up completely, then you just take all them other corners off of it. And this is what I used to do out in my little shed at night after I come home from work, and it kind of really kept peace in the family because Dad wasn't sitting in his chair growling at everybody. And it taught me how to draw tapers. And tapers are what we see them everywhere. No matter if you're making a knife, you think about it, a knife's tapers. All right, so I've got an 11 and a half piece. I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to start my taper on the other end. You'll notice I'll take a couple licks on one side and I'll rotate it 90 degrees and I'll start working on that other side. That helps me do several things. It helps me to, just a second. It helps me keep the piece square. I don't blow it out in one direction or another. It helps me keep it straighter because when I'm going from side to side like that, I can see if I'm putting a twist in it. I tell my students in every class that I have that the metal is not going to do anything that they don't tell it to do. So I don't accept, well, it did this, when they come up and ask me what's wrong with it. You know, a piece of metal is kind of like a gun. It won't do anything at all if you don't tell it to do it. I would say probably that drawing a taper, whether it's on something like this or whether you're drawing a taper to start a scroll for a gate or anything else, a taper is probably the most basic skill as a blacksmith that we can learn. I think it was Mitch here that was telling me a little while ago, you know, he's been attending Huntsville Forge and he's, you know, learned how to make nails, and he's done some twisting, but I would almost bet that nail making is where a whole bunch of us started out. I know that's the first thing I take that back, it wasn't a nail. The smith at Lincoln's New Salem, I used to get so aggravated. He'd draw a taper down, and it was like he drew it down to hypodermic needle sharpness. And I fought and fought and fought, and I never could get anything down like that. And then I figured it out, and I learned the secret. If you're drawing something down to a sharp taper, you need to work on the off side of your anvil. That way, when you're working on that point, got a better angle, your hammerhead needs to be hanging down just a little bit over the edge of your anvil. That way, you're squeezing that metal between your anvil and your hammerhead. If I'm trying to draw a sharp point here in the center of my anvil, then I've got to have my hammer just at the exactly correct angle, because if not, I'm just going to be bottoming it out into the anvil, or I'm going to be creating a hollow spot behind it. You know, and I tell my students that as many things like this as I've done, I never got that precise, that I could draw a sharp point there. But if I move out to the outside edge of the anvil and let that hammer hang over it, I can draw a point down as sharp as anything. All right, that one, thank you. And I think we're about there. Well, quite, that's a short one. All right, we're going to call this one good. And we're going to go back, and I'm going to turn my last, inch and a half into an octagon. So, now we've got a 10-inch piece, 5/16 round. I've drawn it out to a taper on either end. I've turned about the last inch and a half of that into an octagon. And we'll get into why later. Okay, let me finish this one up.
Keep this hot?
Yeah, please. All right. My next step on these, oh, and incidentally, in ironing the hat, there will be a cheese cutter kit. It's got a piece of material, 5/16, 10 inches long. It's got a piece of wire, and we'll talk about the wire in a little bit. And it's also got a copy of Doug's original notes that he gave me about making cheese cutters. I had seen I guess the first BAM newsletter that I ever got. Doug had in the newsletter the steps that he made to do these cheese cutters. When I went to New Salem one day and was trying to think of what to do, I was trying to mentally remember these steps, it turned out okay, but just as a example, I have brought my first cheese cutter for y'all to see today. I made it out of 1/4 inch stock. You know, I drew it to a taper. I put some twist in it. I put a little loop in it. I had brought a piece of MIG welding wire, stainless steel MIG welding wire, which I wrapped around it that day. And it's not quite what we're going to finish up with today, but this is just an example. You start, you practice, things change, you get better. But this was my first one, and we use it. We still use it around the house. All right, next I'm going to come over here to the anvil, or to the vise. I've already put a mark at 2 inches in my vise. I'm going to use a real handy little twisting wrench that stays in my box all the time. Mark Murphy made this for me, and I carry it around all the time. And there's very little that I do that I can't twist with this twisting wrench. So I'm going to grab a piece, okay? I'm gonna bring it over here and put it in the vise. Put Mark's magic little twisting wrench on here, and I'm gonna put a twist about like that in it. Because remember, now this is gonna be a food item, so you don't want to put places in it that you may not get good and clean. Okay. And we'll just go ahead and do both of these the same. And see, your twisting wrenches doesn't have to be made out of a 14-inch pipe wrench with a jaw on either side. But there's a place for them big ones. Well, Mark, you could have done a better job with that guy. Yeah. Okay. Now, Travis, you got a wood, Travis, where's your wooden mallet at? Thank you. If you've got a piece that you've forged and you need to straighten it out a little bit, get you a wood mallet. It doesn't have to be this nice. You can just take a chunk of wood and use it, and that way you can straighten out your piece, and you're not going to ruin anything that you've done with it. Okay, we got one more twist to do, right? And as with most twists, they're just decorations. If you, the secret of twisting is to have the same temperature and the same mass of metal in the area that you want to twist. If you've got that, then your twists are always going to turn out looking fairly uniform. If you don't, you know, they could get interesting. Well, and another thing that I try to tell my students is a straight piece is always, always easier to work with than a crooked piece of metal is. All right, so we've got our piece. We've drawn out both ends. I've come in 2 inches. I've put a little bit of twist in it just for decoration purposes. If you wanted to not do that, that's fine. I've made cheese cutters where I've basically just forged them square, didn't put any twist, because just the transformation between the round and the square is attractive to the eye. Okay, and you know, let's all remember that the beauty of hand forged ironwork is the way the light reflects off of it after you get done. You know, a diamond's just a rock until the facets are put on it. And the light has an opportunity to reflect off of it. And a piece of iron works the same way. Now, this next step, we can do a variety of different ways. You can, we're just going to form a little loop over the edge of the anvil, little loop just like this. When you form, if we were forming a rat tail or the end of a hook or something, you know, we'd start out and we'd put just a little bit over the anvil and we'd tap it and a little bit more and tap it, turn it around. Because I done 11,000+ of these, I wound up taking an 89-cent pair of Kmart pliers and I welded a piece of 1/2-inch round on it. My little loops wound up being a little bit bigger than Doug's and a little bit more round, but that's the way that I wanted them to look. I'll lay it here, you can get a better idea of it. So we're going to take now and we're just going to form them ends, and we'll do this one, and I'm going to form that loop so that it lines up with the diagonal of that taper that I formed. That one got a little square. Turn this around. We're going to get that hot, and we're going to do the same thing with the other one. Just going to grab it. I don't want to quite close it. I'm just going to turn it around a little bit. Yes, yes, that's always preferable, but that's the advantage of leaving a round spot in the center. Because if I curl one way and the other, I can still put a twist in it, nobody knows.
I can't hear his question on the video.
Oh, the question that Steve asked me, was it preferable to do the loops facing the same direction? And yes, but like I said, if you leave a round spot, that way you can twist it and nobody knows the difference. We don't see the twist we put in round spots. Do we do the other one on both sides yet? All right, let's do that, and then we'll talk about that. All right, now, so we've started with our cylinder, we've drawn a taper to each side. I'm working pretty close to a known dimension. I put a mark in the vise so that my twist would wind up in the same place. I put my little curls in it, and the purpose of octagon, making that last inch into an octagon, is now I don't also have a sharp corner to where when I tie my wire around it, it's a sharp enough corner to cut my wire. All right, now this next step, I'm going to bend it, and again, let me get a drink here. We could bend several ways. We can work around the horn and bend it. We could use our bending fork and bend it around. We could just work freehand off the side of the anvil. When I was a volunteer at Lincoln's New Salem, the smith there, and his name was Jim Patton. If you're watching out there, Jim, thank you very much. Jim did almost all of his work right here on the anvil. So consequently, that's where I do a lot of my work. And you can do all this there. Again, since I'll only need a little bit more than half of it. Again, since I used to do these in mass quantities, I made me a jig, so that I could control my size and everything wound up looking pretty much the same. Because remember, when I was doing this, I was selling these all over, and a customer tended to want them to look the same from one batch to the next. Brush it off real good. Are you ready? Yeah, let's get that a little warmer right there on the end, right there on the end. Okay. Come over here. Hook it into my jig. Bring it around. Flatten it up. Now, when I was working on these every few days, I was using a gas forge, and normally I had oh, I would do these at about 5 at a time. And I'd throw them in a pile. And at the end of the day, I would take them and I would put them on a rack and I would drop them down into a bucket of muriatic acid to take all that scale off of them, clean them up real nice and shiny. You know what, Dustin, let's there they are. I'm going to take my scrolling pliers and I'm just going to tweak them ends in just a little bit.
Working on the scroll.
Just right down here. Just the last inch and a half. Because I want this to look kind of nice and round rather than just a U like my first one was. All right, so I'm going to take this one, tweak it in just a little bit, tweak this one in just a little bit. There, much better, much better. That's what we like. And I'm going to take and wire brush this one real good. And we'll talk about finish in a little while. So there's that one. Got it. Much better. And here's kind of another lesson that I learned a long time ago, that if you're making multiples of something and you start out with the same amount of material and you do the same things to that material, then when you get done, they're going to be pretty close to the same. All right, we're just going to lay these down, let these cool, and with the advantage of modern photography, now we're going to take this one right over here into the vise, and we'll tie the wire. When I was tying my cheese cutter wire, I'd lock them in my vise. I'm using this is 30 thousandths stainless steel lock wire. I used to buy these in pound cans here. I used to buy these in pound cans, and just I use stainless steel lock wire for everything. But I'm going to take it and I'm going to loop it around like this. Leave a little excess. And I'm going to take one end and I'm going to wrap it around one complete turn. It's almost a turn and a half. And then I'm going to pull that tight around that wire like that. The other end, I'm going to grab my other 89-cent pair of Kmart pliers. And I'm going to squeeze it just a little bit. I'm going to come around, over, and I'm going to hold that wire tight up against that end. I'm going to snip it off. Then I'm going to do this other end, pull it into the center, wrap it around about 3 times, keep it nice and tight. Cut it off, and make sure that little stub of cut off material is wrapped around your cheese cutter tight. Now, and there we have a cheese cutter. Yes, I realize that the cheese wire doesn't go down all the way to the bottom. So if you want to cut your cheese completely down to the bottom of the board, you'll have to turn your cheese cutter on the side. I would occasionally have someone ask me about that, and my answer was, it is what it is. You know. Okay. Now, to finish these, when I was making a bunch of them and sending them out, at this point, then, I would dip them down. Well, I take that back. I went through a preliminary heat where I just took them back in the forge and took them up to a nice blue heat, and I'd pull them out, and when they got cool enough, I'd dip them in a gallon can of WD-40 that I had sitting there. And then after I got them all wrapped, I'd hang them and I'd dump them down in there again, and I'd let them drip dry a little bit, and I'd wipe it off, and that's how I'd send it out. And I would always send a card, you know, that people needed to wash their cheese cutters or whatever implement before they used it. And after that, just hand wash it and dry it. And it will just, this one, I know never had anything put on it. But since it's been hand washed and dried for these many years, you know, it's still in pretty good shape. Things to watch out for. We talked about getting your twists too tight to get in there, and so you can't keep it clean because this is a food item. We don't want a place where food was trapped. All right. So there's the cheese cutter, and we'll finish up them cup. Oh, finish. I was talking about finish. Because I make so few things anymore, what I've gone to use, because one of the ladies that was down here one day heard me talking about dipping things in WD-40, and she got excited. I've gone to using PAM, okay? So you can take your, let's see, where's them others at? Oh, here they are. Now they've kind of cooled a little bit. I'm going to pick some place where Travis doesn't walk all the time, because I noticed the other day after I'd done this in the garage that it's kind of slick on the floor. So I'm going to spray a little PAM on there. As you can see, that makes it a little shinier. It'll protect it, keep it from rusting. But there again, if you make a food item, you know, tell people to hand wash it, hand dry it, it won't rust. And just like, you know, if you still use any cast iron, you know, it'll kind of develop its own patina. And that's that one. And we'll wipe that off and finish it off in a little bit. Don't see clay yet.
Hey, Al,
Sir.
you showed me once how to tighten that wire. It's a little loose.
Oh, yeah. If your wire gets loose, you can hanging over the edge of your anvil or over your horn, and just give it a little tap here, and it'll tighten everything back up again. All right, so that's the first cheese cutter, or the first two cheese cutters. And I'll wrap these others. I'll put wire on these others later, and we'll get them in iron in the hat too. Now the cheese cutters was one of the items that I made that I've never put my mark on. Now there may be one or two out there with a little 1/4-inch mark on them. But as you can see, you know, they're pretty small, but there's a lot of interesting things when you look at them, when you look at one close. We'll move back over here to the anvil. You know, we started out with our round rods, so now we've got our tapers. Our tapers, we turned our little loop down there diagonally to our taper. So we've got a taper, we've got our loop, we come up into a twist. You know, it comes up out of the twist, and then just very gradually it turns into this round here. Just a lot of little interesting things for the eye to look at. And as I said, Doug was very much into shapes and forms and how the light was reflected, and kind of taught me to look at it like that also. And we'll wrap them later. The next one, like I said, I was hoping Clay would show up, so I'll just have to show you a picture. This is what we're going to do next. And this is the picture I took down at Clay's. So I'm not real sure what the dimensions are, but that's where we're going to be working at towards today. I'm going to start with a piece of 1/4 by 1, 10 inches long, and I'm going to start drawing my taper. I'm going to start from the end. Now, remember, when you start working on a piece of irregular shaped stock like this, yeah, let's use them next time, Dustin. When we're starting to forge this taper here, that stock is going to want to, you know, kind of turn into a U on us. So take a few licks, start forging your taper down, and then always bring it back to the flat, and make sure you're not forming a cold shut in that. Let's use these. We're going to draw that out. Like I said, I started with a piece 10 inches long. We're going to draw these pieces out, this half of it out to about 6.5 inches long, and then we'll do some other stuff to it. Questions? I tell all the people in my classes that if you have a question, please ask it, because chances are real good that the person next to you's got the same question, but they just don't want to answer it. Ask it. So don't ever hesitate to ask questions. Go on the side. I'm checking it for straight. I'm checking to make sure I don't fold it over. I'm going to take that down, probably a little shy of a 1/2 inch. I always tell my students too that just because a piece of metal is hand forged, it doesn't necessarily look like it's going to be run over by a truck. So take your time, flatten your pieces up, keep them smooth, keep them clean. If you're working in a fire that produces a lot of scale, brush your scale off before you start forging, so that you don't drive it down in your piece. That's good. Now I'm kind of watching my center line here to make sure I don't get one side let's see how long we've got that. All right, I've taken that 5 inches down. That's a little more than 6, but we're not gonna go too long with that. I discovered, I made a practice one of these the other day, and I discovered that my dimensions were just a little long. So we've got basically just a taper here. We're going to wind up splitting this to make the 2 arms of that piece. But now I'm going to turn it around, and I'm going to work on the handle portion of this. We started with 10 inches. I've got a punch mark just at 5 inches to kind of visually show me what I want to do. And all I'm going to do now is kind of neck my handle down just a little bit. So we'll be drawing another little taper down into where our transition area is here. Huh? Huh? So I'm going to find my punch mark, which is there. And again, I want to be careful that I don't put me a crease in here that's going to trap food. This could be done in a lot of different ways. As you can see, I've just been using it on the edge of Travis's anvil here. If you've got a guillotine tool, you can set that edge like that. A spring fuller, would set an edge there. Just a lot of different ways to do that. And no one way is better than the other. Well, it's not the cleanest transition I've ever done, but give me one more good heat down in here, Dustin, so I can clean that off. Pardon? Yeah, no, we'll just, oh, we can, okay. We're gonna get this warm. And we're gonna talk about different ways to do things, all right? I could use my hammer. I could, just take my time, make sure that's good and flat. If you've got somebody over at your house helping you to where you're both doing something and you've got a flatter or a top tool, you could flatten it up like that. And we're going to get Dustin set up and he's going to hand me the piece and we're just going to flatten this a little bit. It won't take a lot of work, but it'll take just a lick or two. Okay? And let me get it straight. And we're going to take our flatter, and Dustin's going to hit it. Again. Stop. All right, we're going to turn it over. Stop. And now we've got a nice flat surface again that's not got any cold shuts in it. Nice and clean. Thank you. All right, so now we're going to work on splitting these tines apart. And we'll talk about some different ways to do that. If you're working by yourself, which, many of us do most of the time, sometimes operations like this can, yeah, we're going to split it now, can be a little bit difficult to do. Because you've got you've got your piece laying there, you're going to have a tool in this hand and a tool in this hand, and, what do I do with it? And there's different ways to do that. I'm going to start off just splitting with a straight chisel. Or not a straight chisel, just my do everything chisel. And I'm going to start at the back by where my punch mark is. So I've got my punch mark here, which is pretty well in the center. I'm going to put my thing here. And I'm going to start my chisel back here. And I'm going to hit it. And I'm just going to start walking down the center of my blade. And you can see my piece is kind of moving around some on the anvil. But that's not a big issue. Take your time. Keep your piece in the center. Keep your cut in the center, because we want these I'll call them tines for lack of a better word, to be pretty much the same. Okay, now I've got my original line cut in there. Flatten it up. We'll give Ashton a little picture there. So that's one way to do it. Another way we'll just show here is if you have a hold down for your anvil. Thank you. Which sits in here like this, and you put your piece in, you tap it down, and sometimes they hold pretty good, and sometimes, they don't hold very good. But we'll just get this hot, and it'll still keep your piece from flopping around. Okay. So we'll make our second cut with that, and rather than just use the straight chisel, here's a chisel that I made years ago out of a piece of, I think it was a piece of jackhammer bit. And I forged the chisel, then I forged the groove around it. I wrapped my handle out of some of my trusty 5/16 stock, which I always had laid around, and welded it a little bit, and I've used that as a slitting chisel ever since. So Dustin's gonna give me our piece. We're gonna put it in our hole down here. Our hole down doesn't look like it's gonna do much, but then I grab my hammer and I grab my slitting chisel and I come back here and I notice I've got the handle of my slitting chisel offset just a little bit, so that if I'm working on a long piece like this, my hand's not over the hot piece of the ironwork. All right, now I've made another pass. I'm a little bit deeper. We're gonna get this warm again, and we're gonna talk about another kind of hold down. And this next hold down is really the one that I've used the most. I've got a window weight out of an old window, and you can find those, various places. Normally, you'll find them in an antique store that are all polished up and no telling what you'll give for one. You can find them at junkyards, or you can just take you a piece of material and weld you a little chain to it or whatever you want to, secure it on one side of your anvil, and then you just drop it down over your piece. Whether you're working on a flat piece or a square piece or a round piece or an octagon piece, this chain will hold it all. All right, we're ready? And I'm going to grab it here, and I'm going to drop my chain down, and I'm going to pick up my slitting tool, and we're going to, as you can see, that hold down worked pretty good. Now, we'll show one more thing while we're cutting this, and then we'll move on. Now this time, again, if you and your buddy are making two of them together, what we do, the buddy, you can hold the you can hold your piece and you can hold your chisel and let your buddy do the striking. Plate. Travis says, put a plate on the anvil before you drive that chisel all the way down through there. Oh yeah, that's it. Yeah. So Travis has got him a nice piece of. Watch that, don't get too hot. Travis has got it. Where'd your hammer go?
I got it.
You got it? All right. Travis has got him a nice piece of aluminum here. We all don't have, and somewhere in this area, there is I think it's a half-inch piece of aluminum, and it has my touch mark on it. Every shop I go into, I look for the cutting plate with that touch mark, and I can't find it anywhere. It's somewhere. But if you don't want to buy just a piece of aluminum or copper or brass or whatever to do this, okay, here's one. Travis has got a soft plate that he puts down in his hardy hole. the last aluminum plate that I got, I made out of the monitor stand from an old Apple computer. It's aluminum. It's real nice. This next one I stamped Al Stevens across on both sides. I painted it red, and then I sanded the red off. So if one of you guys pick up my cutting plate, I'm going to know it pretty quick. All right, we're gonna use this aluminum cutting plate. Maybe we better use the steel one since Dustin's striking. All right, we ready, boss? And this time we'll just go ahead and start at the end. Let's go here. One more. All right, good. So, now we've got our piece split out. It started to separate a little bit. I'm going to just kind of flatten them out again. Now, if you're working in one of our little 2-burner propane forges, keep in mind that you've got to have your piece always so that you can get it back in that forge. You know, working in coal here, we don't have to worry about it too much. But you can see when we cut this out that we've developed, you know, pretty ugly, you know, rag in there where we've cut it. You could take and you can hot rasp this out. You can, you know, let it cool and put it on your belt sander and take it out, or just work it with a regular file. But that's got to be cleaned up, irregardless. You cannot leave that like that. All right. So you can see now a little bit where, you know, how we're forging this out of a single piece. Just to kind of speed things up a little bit, we're going to throw this one down on the ground, and I told Dustin that I'd probably just that one there. Okay. Let's do this in first. This is a practice piece that I worked on the other day. You see, I've gone through the same steps. I've you know, forged my tines down. I've formed my handle. I've split it. I went ahead in there and went in and cleaned that up so we don't have to go through all this. Let's do this in first, I think. Get that hot. All right. Cutting plate. Never drive your chisel down through your anvil. I don't know where it's at. We'll put it there. Especially if you're working on Travis's anvil. He takes a very dim view of that. All right. Doug put a little hole in the top of his. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to put that hole in there. And just like everything else, there's several ways that you could do this. A real good example of splitting and drifting something, or punching a hole and then spreading that out, if you've not taken the time to look at it, stop and look at the ring project out there. When we done that, we did what, 92 or something holes in it. I've got me a chisel made. Hold that for me. Well, I had a mark in it, Dustin. Oh, there it is. Okay. Look at it, make sure it's straight. And over. Well, it didn't come out. There we go. And now we've got our hole that we're going to start. The next thing I'm going to do is drift that out round. Again, just a real simple slotted punch that I had to start that. This is a 5/8 drift, 5/8 round. Travis's anvil again is real nice. We'll start that through our hole, run it through from both sides, and we ought to have a pretty nice little. Here, hold this just for a second, Dustin. And now we've got a nice little 5/8 hole there, and we're going to clean up them square corners. Punching holes is another basic skill. You know that there is a time and place for it all the time. That kind of got ugly. Well, yeah, that'll work. We're going to bring that out, just take one heat out here on the horn and round that up a little bit. Yeah, that even wound up a little bit bigger than what I wanted, but that's what we're going to go with. Again, I'm taking time to make sure that it's flat, that I'm not putting any coal shuts in it. And now we'll go to work on our tines again. When we come out, the first thing I'm going to do is spread them out a little bit. You can, and again, there's various ways you can do that. You know, we don't all have this shelf like Travis has got. We're going to run it down over our cutoff. you know, working back and forth and open it like that. Then I'll probably move to the horn here. Thank you. Okay, now before I go much farther here, I've got to put my little loops in the ends to tie my wire. So Dustin's just going to heat up one of my little tines, and as you can see on the picture, the loops that Doug put in there, you know, were really fairly small. So we'll just put these in over the edge of the anvil. I'm going to draw them down to a little bit sharper point than they are now. Same way we did the first ones. Give me one more. Let me have one more heat there, Dustin. And again, you can form your little rat tails, you know, over the edge of the anvil. You can do them over the horn if they're large enough. If you've got you a pair of handy dandy scrolling tongs, you just grab a hold of it like that, and you put your little loop in it. All right, give me one more heat on this tine, please, Dustin. All right, what I'm going to do is go ahead and kind of forge this tine into shape. I'm just going to do it over a little longer. I'm just going to do it over the horn of the anvil. Again, you do that in multiple places. You could use the horn of the anvil. You could put your twisting fork up in your anvil. You could grab it with your scrolling pliers and get it around the way you want it to get. A little higher up yet, still, please. Right up in here. As always, Dustin's doing a very good job tending the fire. And as he's told us all in the past, and some of you newer people, you know, if you really want to learn, don't be afraid to be a fire tender for somebody. Just don't burn their piece up. But you're right on top of everything when you're doing that. All right, very good, very good. So I'm going to grab this here, and I'm just going to. That's not quite enough. I may have made that too long. All right, so that's my first one. Now I'm going to go through the same process on the other one. And while Dustin's warming that up, you know, here's one that I think I done, I don't have a date on it. I know it was done down in Travis's other shop. And this was just 5/16 material that, you know, I cut real long. I brought it together, twisted it, flattened it, then I spread my tines out. Got a handle on it, good and substantial. Steve sent me a bunch of pictures of 4 or 5 variations of this that he did at home. I don't think I put that on the website, but. All right, so, yeah, right on the end. Good job, Dustin. Dustin knows what I'm trying to do better than I do. Okay. One more little heat right on the end there. Okay, get that good and hot. All up in here, good. All right, now just to kind of show you, again, different ways to do things, we can work out this other tine over the horn of the anvil. We could lock it in the vise and we could work it by hand. I'm gonna start this one out in Travis's that piece right here. Bending fork. Thank you, Steve. You guys will get there if you're not there already. Do what? No, you'll forget about being there most of the time. Oh, mercy. All right, so now with my bending fork, if I get it in here right, I can just kind of work this one around. Just kind of however I want to. Get a nice smooth bend in it. But I really wanted that to look a little different. Give me another heat up in here, Dustin. So now, now, we're not too far from this, but we want this to look a little bit different. I'll take my hands off of it now. I think this next time I'm just going to take my That's right. It's not really your final move till you put the cheese wire on it. And you can kind of, maneuver it. All right, so we're going to do this one out like this, a little farther. And we're going to put it in here. A little more like this. There we go. So we've kind of come around to our dimension a little bit more. I think we'll just leave that like that. So the last thing to do then is to now I want this hop right in here, Dustin. We're gonna put one more little couple bends here in the handle, and we'll brush it off real good and let it cool down a little bit, and we'll spray it, and I'll put some Pam on it, and then we'll wrap them with wire, and we'll be done. Sir? Oh, okay. David wants me to make that a little wider so that that fits government cheese, he says. Dustin's, no, here, I need it right in here. No, you're just going to have, yeah, David, take Calvin's fro and cut that government cheese in half, and then you can get this on there. No, let me try it this way. Oh boy, I'm wrecking my kind. And never, ever, ever, we'll go ahead and get that bent, and then we'll come back to our tines. That is almost wide enough for David's government cheese. If we could get David to buy enough Iron in the Hat tickets to make sure he got that, I'd leave it that wide, but you know. Yeah, do what? Oh, goodness. There, more than one way to. Let me find a pair of tongs that fits that. Whoa! Talking about dropping it on the ground. I saw a picture of a fellow's hand in Facebook the other day, and he had knocked a piece off of his anvil and caught it, only to discover that it was really, really hot. And get it warm. The handle part again, Dustin, please. Travis has got a lot of very nice tongs, and he doesn't mind us using them. But if you're ever over here, and come back to our open forge meetings next month, bring your tools. Travis very graciously allows him to Athens Forge to use his shop, but always be respectful of his tools. Okie dokie, now we're okay. Thank you. I'm gonna move down. Okay, move your tongs. Give me one more good heat there, please. We're almost there, I promise. On the cheese cutter kit that I put back there, an iron and a hat, down at the bottom of it, I put what Doug's touch mark looks like. If you ever run across one of his pieces, and then I just put my touch mark besides it and put the date on it. Okay, very good. That's what I want. That's what I'm after. Just going to put a little, just a little. There, just a little something for the eye to play with there. Very subtle. Where's them flat tongs? All right, we're going to take one more heat here and well, I'm losing my mind. Enough. Give me one more heat right in here, Dustin. And then we'll brush it off and we'll be done. Oh. Let me finish this first and then we'll move on to that. Okay, so I'm just going to take my hey, you know what? That got warm. Well, give me another little heat right in here. Again, these are just mild steel pieces, very inexpensive. One of the, for you new guys, one of the advantages to being a member of Athens Forge is normally we keep material on hand back here. So if you need a little piece of material, you can get it here and you don't have to buy a whole bar from someplace. And we're going to call that good right there. I need to clean, well, maybe we'll just leave it like this. I'll check and make sure there's no sharp corners on this back here before we put an iron in the hat. And there's our cheese cutter. And here is Doug's original. You can see Doug drew his handle out a little bit more, which allowed for some, you know, another bend in there. And I should have done the same thing, but it is what it is. All right, we're going to let that cool. I'll put some PAM on it. I'll put some wire on it. And unless anybody has any questions, we'll call it at an end. Ronnie, I told you an hour and a half. Did he leave already? There he is. An hour and a half. We're done. All right. Questions? Nothing. All right. Thank you for coming today. Like I said, we'll let this cool. I'll spray this with PAM. I'll put wire on them other two that we did and put them in the iron in the hat. So there'll be several back there. This one will be in the iron in the hat. That's it. Oh, before for the new people. I know some of you were members or are members at Huntsville Forge, and we're certainly not trying to steal anybody away. But on our months that we do not have a demonstrator here at Athens Forge, we have what's called open forge. Travis allows us to come in and work in this area back here. We've got gas forges, we've got coal forges, we've got hand tools, we've got hammers. All you need to do is bring an idea in. And there'll be normally somebody to help you with it. Or just come in and practice your basics. Practice tapers. Just do a little bit of everything. That's all I've got to say. Thank you all.